Okay, we're live. Okay, hi guys. Welcome to the second session of 2CC on Introduction to REST APIs. So, I hope you all had a great vacation, and we'll just start off where we left off. So, in the previous session, we discussed what a REST API is, what an API is, and what are the six architectural constraints that make any API RESTful. We also started off by making a simple application. So we made a single endpoint to display any particular message. So now we will be building an to-do app using Fast API. So I'll just share my screen. Before that, if you guys have any questions or any doubts regarding REST APIs, what they are, why we use them, you can just put them down in the comment section and I can see that. Okay. Okay, so I'll start sharing my screen. Okay. So, okay, I hope my screen is visible. So, okay, so this is where we left off in the previous session. So we created a single endpoint over here that displays any message that we want to display. So we can just run our server using Python. Just increase the font size. Okay, just let me know if the text is visible. Do you want me to like increase the font size? Okay, so I'm assuming this is readable enough. And okay, so we created a single endpoint at the root URL, which returns GDSEVIT is awesome. So when we go and fire up our app, Python m qvcon main. So this is the command. You can either type uvcon main app semicolon app reload, which will start your server at the local host in the port 8000. So how you can go and see it is just go to your browser and type in localhost 8000, and you can see that whatever message you've typed in here is printing on your browser. So I'll just send in the command. Wait. I hope this is visible. So this right here is the command to start your server. Just leave it on the command. Okay, going back. So this is a okay. So let me just explain the structure of our function over here. So we just register this URL. So whatever is there inside these codes is our URL, and this is our HTTP method. And this function name can be anything, and return is what it is supposed to return. That's pretty obvious. So this is essentially just a root URL. So now let's just go on and make actual roots which will be used in our to-do. So before we do that, we have to make a dictionary called to-dos, which will essentially store our data. So we won't be using a database in this tutorial right now because we'll have to learn about ORMs and SQL for that. We'll just be using a simple Python dictionary. So what will happen is we have to make sure that we fire our app like after we've done building everything, or else every time you reload the app, all your changes will be lost, and whatever data is there inside this dictionary will be lost. So I'll just add in a sample data. So, so how the structure of this dictionary is going to be like is we're going to have an ID over here. So this the key of our dictionary will be the ID, and inside that the value will be another dictionary, and inside this dictionary we will have different title. Let's just say finish, DSD, DA. Then we can have completed false. So this is going to be one task, which is going to be there by default. We can just add more tasks. Study for cat one. Okay. Now we will go ahead and declare our endpoints. So first endpoint will be used to display. So the first one will be to view all the existing to-do items. So since we are using this to get the data, we will be using, wait, before that, let me just go full screen mode. So it's easier for you all to see. Okay, so yeah, we will have an endpoint saying to-dos, and inside this we'll create a function get all to-do items. So okay, great. Now we will return our dictionary, that is to-dos. Okay. Now, okay. So another thing here, there are various ways we can, test out our endpoints and see if they're working. So right now, since it's a get method, when we go to our browser, and if we do slash to dos, you will see this. If you're using Chrome, it will probably be something like localhost. So you can see our dictionary is coming up on the browser screen here, but reading this is actually quite difficult. And since this is a get method, you can probably view it like this. But if it's a post or delete method, it'll be hard to do so. So for that, Fast API has an inbuilt documentation tool. So that is, so you can go to localhost semicolon 8000 slash docs, which will open up your Swagger. So Swagger is a documentation tool. So it comes inbuilt with Fast API. So as you can see, we've declared two endpoints. One is the root endpoint and one is the to-dos endpoint, both of which are visible here. I hope everyone is like, okay, yeah, I hope everyone is able to see and follow along. Okay, so now you can see if I click on this and I want to try out a root endpoint, I just have to click on execute, and you can see here we get a response. So we can test out our APIs using this Swagger. So all you have to do is go to localhost semicolon 8000 slash docs to open Swagger on Fast API. Okay, now let's just see our to-dos as well. So as you can see, our response body has been printed out here. You've got two to-do items. Those are finished DSGDA and study for Cat 1. So you can use Swagger for documentation as well as testing your API, but even better way to do this would be using a tool such as Postman. So instead of Postman, you can use an extension or VS Code called Thunder Client. So you can just go to your extensions and search for Thunder Client over here. It's wait, yeah, it's this one by Ranga Vedineni. So just go ahead and install this, and after that you'll be able to see it here. So over here you can just create new requests. So let me just delete all the existing ones. Okay, so this is what it'll look like. Now you can just go ahead, click on new request, and over here you can change the URL to localhost semicolon 8000 slash, and it's a get request, so you can change the HTTP methods over here. So we'll be using a get request here, and as you can see, the response is printed out over here. Okay. Now we can check for another endpoint, that is slash to dos. Now if we do this, you can see our response, that is finish DSGDA and study for cat 2, has been printed out over here. So we've just used a predefined dictionary over here. Now let's try adding items to this dictionary. So we have to create another endpoint, that is to create to do items. So we'll be using a post method, since we saw in our last session, post method is used for creating resources on your database, on your backend, and which is your database essentially. So it'll just be, we'll just declare a URL as slash to dos for this as well. Now we'll go create to do item. Okay. Okay, so before we do that, we need to take in some kind of a data from the user. So this data we will be taking in will be in JSON form. Uh, so how we can do it is we can just type it in here. Title. And whenever we have any doubt, we can just go refer to the Fast API's documentation, which is really good, by the way. So I would suggest all of you to refer to that while you're building your API if you're using Fast API. So you can see there are different parameters over here. There's path parameter, query parameter, quest body. Okay. So we'll be using this Pydantic base model to define a schema for our request body. So, okay, so we'll go back to our code over here, and here we will define request body schema. So this schema is actually a class. So just name it as to do item, and we'll be inheriting from the base model class. So our base model class was imported from Pydantic, which is a library used for uh, defining types in Python. So Python is a dynamically typed language, but if you want to implement type checking, we can use Pydantic. Um, so okay, now we can see over here we have two items in our total. That is title, title, which is a string field, and completed, which is a Boolean field. So just define our model as such. Now over here, instead of two separate parameters, we can just take in to do item. Let's follow snake style to do item, and it will be of the type to do item. Okay, so we have our to do item, and now we'll be storing it in our dictionary. So we need to get the ID for the dictionary. So the ID will be equal to max use plus 1. Okay, and dot id is equal to do item. So pydantic models allows us to create a dictionary from our pydantic model. So all we have to do is just use the dictionary method. So they should work. Now let's just return the item. So what we've done here is we've created a post request endpoint on the URL slash to dos, and we'll be taking in the request body of in such a schema that we'll be taking title and completed. So title is string and completed is a boolean object, and then we will be getting the maximum ID. So here we'll get 2 plus 1, that should be 3, and we'll be storing the value of whatever data we received in the with the key as 3, and then we will be returning the item. So we can just create a new request on our Thunder client here, local host 8000 slash to do's. And okay, over here we'll go to our body request dot body. You can see it's the fourth tab, and in JSON content we'll be setting title. So let's just write it as study for, let's say, DSA quiz. Okay, and completed will be marked as false. So one thing to note here is this JSON content should be um, in JSON form, while it'll be stored as a dictionary in our backend. So here it's a small case false, and there it's a capitalized false. Um, so let's just try out our endpoint. If to change the method to post. Now, as you can see, you can check your terminal as well. It has hit the endpoint post with a post request on slash to dos, and a new object has been created, that is, which has title study for DSA quiz, and it's marked as false in the completed. So we can go back to our to dos endpoint, and we can just check. Here you can see we have added another item to our dictionary, that is study for DSA quiz. So we've successfully created a new entity. So we used our post method. Now the next endpoint which we will be creating is to 3 update you. So we need to update our to do item. So let's just say uh, so for this we will be using our put method, and our URL will be slash to do's slash ID. So the ID over here is going to be the ID of our to do item. So for finish DSADA, it's 1. For study for cat 1, it's 2. So we're going to go over here and create a function for this as well. Update to do item. And for the we will again be taking in the pydantic model that we created, which is to do item as the request body node. Yeah, so we'll be taking that in as our request body. Okay, so now what we'll do is simply change the dictionary item where the ID is. This ID will be fetched directly from your endpoint. We have to define it here as well. Int. Okay, so we'll be taking the ID from the URL, and then we'll be setting the value of that to our to do item text. So this should apply all the changes, and we will be returning this as like we did in our previous endpoint as well. So let's just go out and test it. So we can just create a new request, localhost 8000 slash to dos. But there's a slight change over here. We will have to mention the ID. So let's just change our first, and we'll change the method to put, and in our JSON we will have our title. So let's change, let's keep the title the same, study for DS, was it finish DSD. Okay. Okay, but there's a slight change over here. We are going to change our completed and mark it as true. Okay, so now when we hit the endpoint, you can see it's changed over here. And now when we go ahead and check our to-dos list, you can see over here it's marked as true, even though it was marked as false over here. We just updated it using our put request. And you might be wondering where our third item went. So since I mentioned earlier, every time we reload or make changes to our code, the dictionary resets itself back to the original value, which is only two items. So we lose our third item. Ideally we'll be storing this in our database, but for now we'll just be using dictionaries. So our data will be lost every time we add a new data. Okay, so moving on. Now, suppose we want to delete our to do item. So then we have to create another endpoint for that using the delete method. So we'll be using delete to do item. For that, do you guys have any doubts? Let me just check the chat. Okay, no doubts. Okay, so moving back to the code, I'm gonna do dot, and this time we'll be using a delete method since we'll be deleting an item. So semicolon slash to do's, and we will need the ID again. So we'll be passing this as a path parameter. F delete underscore to do item. We'll be taking in the ID, which will be an integer value, and you won't be taking in any data this time. So all we have to do is to do's dot pop ID since it's a dictionary, and we'll just do return since no data will be sent back. So now we can just test out our request. So I'll click on a new request over here, localhost 8000 slash to do slash one, and I'll be using the delete method. So let's try. You can see it, the response was null, which means no data was sent back. Over here it hit our URL slash to do slash one with the delete method. Now we can go ahead and check if it has been updated. So we'll go to our slash to do endpoint and hit another request. So now we can see that the first item, which was finish DSDDA, has been deleted successfully. So we've successfully built a CRUD application which creates a resource, reads resources, updates, and then deletes. Over here, I'll just add one more endpoint. So in case I want to only see a single item, I can just do app.get slash to dos slash id, and then def get to do item. I'm gonna go pass an id as a parameter. Return to dos id. This is going to fetch me the single item of whose id I specified. Okay, so when I go back over here, localhost, create a new request that says localhost semicolon 8000 slash to do slash one. And yeah, this will be a get request. Now, when I click on send, you can see I got the first item, that is finished DSGDA. Now, let me try something. I'm going to type in 3 over here, and it sends me an internal server error because, as you know, the ID 3 does not exist in our dictionary. So, ideally, this is not a good way to handle our exceptions. So, for this, we will be using HTTP status codes. So, okay, now we'll be checking if the ID exists. So, if ID in todos. So, what this does is it will check if the value that's coming in from our URL exists in the keys of todos. Then we will be returning this, and in any other situation, we will return an HTTP exception. Okay, and we can specify the status code over here. So, in the case of item not being found, you must have seen this almost everywhere. We return a 404, that is item not found. So, we'll just do status. So, status is a module which will allow us to easily get different status codes. You can also put in the integer value, but this is a better way to do it. So we'll be returning a status code of HTTP 404 not found. So if the ID does not exist in to-dos, we'll be returning this HTTP exception. And let's just add a detail not item not found. So this will just send us a message that the item was not found. So now if we go to our get to do 3, you can see it returned a status code of 404 and the detail over here as item not found. So this is really helpful for the front end, so it can know that okay, the what was the issue, and it can just display it to the user. Okay, so one more thing. Now, if the request was success, we need to also send another response saying the status code, which lets the front end know that the request was a success. So for this, we can just add it in the decorator of Fast API over here. So over here, we'll just write status code status HTTP. Okay, so we'll be using 200, which is okay. So in any case, so in every case the request is successful, it will be returning a 200 status code, and in case there is an issue, it will be returning a 404 not found. So let's just go ahead and check this. Okay, it's not found. Now if I check when it's one, you can see over here the status code is 200. Okay, so our request is being executed successfully, and so the code is 200. So we can just go ahead and copy this and put this in other places as well. So whenever there's a get request, we generally use this status code. So I'll just put it in all the places I've got a get request, and even where I've got a put request. Okay. And in case of a post request, which is when we are creating a to do item, we are going to send a status code of 201. So 201 is created. So whenever we create a resource, we generally send this. And we'll be checking if the ID exists for put as well, because we cannot update a to do item if it does not exist. So over here, let's just if ID in to do's do this. Otherwise, we'll be returning an HTTP exception with the status code of HTTP status dot HTTP. Let's just find it from here. 404 not found. And the detail will again be the same. Item not found. So we can go ahead and do the same thing for our delete method as well, because nothing can be deleted if it does not exist. So over here, if ID not introduce, we will do this. Otherwise, we'll be getting a 404 not found. And slight change on the delete method over here. So since we are not returning any content in the status over here, we'll be using a status code of 204 that says no content. So no content is returned. So we've successfully built a application that gets to do items, gets a single to do item, creates to do items, updates to do item, and deletes. Now, we discuss different concepts over here, like the HTTP status codes. So, whenever the request is success, the status codes are between 200 to 299. So, as you can see, when deleting, it's 204. When it's updating, 200. When it's creating a resource, 201, we've used it. And in any case, if there's an issue on the client side, so the data which is coming in from the front end or the client has an issue with it, in those cases we are using a 404. And if our application has some issue and it's not able to execute particular code properly, we'll be getting uh, the response code of 500 to 599. So these are the HTTP status codes. Apart from that, we also saw the URL. So these are the URLs, URL patterns. We've kept them really simple and understandable. So they're easy to read and anybody can make out what is being done. So we just have slash uh, curly braces ID. So whenever we are having a parameter that is, a variable and subjected to the change as per the request, we'll be using a what's it, curly braces for that, and we'll be taking in it in the function call as the parameter. Apart from this, we also discussed different HTTP methods. So we've used delete to delete the item, put to update the item, post to create the item, and get for reading the item. So another thing that we have missed out right now are the query parameters. So query parameters can be used for sorting and searching. So we can just create new parameters like search, or let's keep it title. Alright. Okay, so we'll be searching our to do items based on their titles. So when there's a long list of to do items, we might not know uh, if a particular item exists or where to find it. So let's just have a query of title. So if they've specified title, okay, so we'll create an empty dictionary which is of results, and over here we'll create an empty dictionary for results over here, and every time we find a to do item where the title matches our title of the query, so we will add that to our dictionary. So if okay, first we loop. So for id in to do's, if to do's id title. So if title in return res- results id equal to use id. Okay, so every time so it'll loop through all the to dos, and if it finds a title, uh, so if it finds the query parameter which is title being matched inside our dictionary, it'll just add that particular item to the results dictionary, and we will return the results dictionary at the end. Else results equal to to dos and return results. So let's just see if this is working fine. Okay, okay, so now we want the query to be none as well. So at times we might not need a query parameter. So we'll just try using. Okay, so by default, it's going to be an empty string. Okay, so let me just walk you through what we're doing over here once again, since it's a bit complicated. So we'll be creating an empty results dictionary in our get existing to do items endpoint. So if the if a title has been passed as a query parameter, then we it'll check. Otherwise, if nothing is passed, it's an empty string. So if in case it's an empty string, it'll just um, add all the to dos as a result and return it. Otherwise, it'll loop through all the to dos and check if the title is matching. And if it is, then it appends the results dictionary, and then we get the result. So let's just test it out. Title equal to DSD. So as you can see here, when we add the query parameter as title, we are only getting the first item because it has DSD in it. Now suppose I then study. Okay, so when I put in study, it does not match any of the titles, so it's returning an empty dictionary. So let's just see. Okay, now if I put study in caps, it's returning the second to do item because as you can see over here, it has a study in its title. So these are query parameters. There are various uses for these. So I've used them for searching. You can also try using them for sorting. So you might have seen Amazon and other e-commerce websites. So they generally use these for sorting. So suppose you want to filter by a particular category or a particular price range, so you can just have a query parameter that says, okay, these let's say filter by, and the parameter will have different values. And you can also use these for pagination. So you can have page number one, so that will display a given number of results, and page number two, that will again display a different number of results. So you've successfully created we've created a to do API which performs all the basic CRUD applications. And let's just put a tick over here. So it views all the tasks. It views a single task. We can add new tasks. We can edit existing tasks. We can delete tasks, and we can search for tasks. So we've successfully created a to do application. I hope you enjoyed this session. And if there's any doubts, you can ask right now. Okay, so I'm assuming you don't have any doubts. I hope you enjoyed this session. And stay tuned for more sessions by GDSC. Thank you.